the sound on the mic? I think it's mainly for the recording. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So if you didn't already order the pizza, I think there'll be plenty for everyone using the pizza app. DevCon's coming up. Did it get passed around? Oh, there. You want to pass around the pizza app? There we go. So just plus or minus the slices you want. So it's pretty easy. DevCon, we're madly preparing for all the things that are going on there for us. And I'm sure you're prepared. Jim is preparing for training there. It's going to be a good time. And then tonight, Carson, you are actually speaking at DevCon as well? Yeah, cool. What is your topic? In robotics. You should have talked about that here. You could practice on us then. Oh, okay, good. So we're going to swap it out today. No, I'm just kidding. FileMaker 18. That is the subject of the day. It was released not too long ago, and we're celebrating. So here's a link to what we call our full scoop FileMaker 18 is here article on our website, and it has links out to a lot of other websites, a lot of kind of consolidating a lot of the information that's out there, videos and things on that one article. So we waited about a week before we released the article so that we could see everything that everyone else is doing. And so today we're going to take kind of an approach of sharing the burden of talking, not the burden, but talking about this. I guess it's a burden because you have to prepare. You know, it's like before you come up here and talk about something. So we've got some volunteers who are going to talk about various parts of FileMaker 18. I'm going to give just a brief overview, and then we've got the while function, the new import dialog, file manipulation script steps. John's going to talk a little bit about FileMaker Server 18 and installation procedures. And then Sean will share some of his favorite little things about FileMaker 18 that, you know, a lot of these things don't always make it into the notes, but they change minor little things that make things easier. So I'll just say that a lot of focus at FileMaker is on WIP. If you have not heard WIP, it's the Workplace Innovation Platform. So that's the overall marketing category for FileMaker, and that's in strong force with 18. So they own that category pretty much because they invented it is one of the reasons. And so that you can say that FileMaker is the #1 workplace innovation platform in the world today. So I would look at FileMaker 18 as being kind of a cleanup and tune-up release. There's maybe more going on underneath the hood than what you'll see. You know, it's like some of it doesn't really sell well. I mean, it's like, you know, you can say we made all these changes in the server engine. It's a multi-processor server engine. Well, that's in preparation for things that they're going to do in the future, but it doesn't really, on a day-to-day basis, you may not notice that. It actually, some of these things can affect performance of FileMaker in the future. Again, on a day-to-day basis, with most solutions that are fairly simple, you may not notice a change. It's not going to feel faster or slower, but in high performance situations, it may make a big difference in the future. There's the new security dialog, which is really obvious. The new import dialogs that it's a major overhaul to the user interface. The upgrades are going to be easier. Once 18 is installed, it's going to be really easy to upgrade to 19, so they've been simplifying those procedures. The technical specs have gone up as well, so you have to be at a minimum of 10.13 for Mac OS and Windows 7 Service Pack 1. We have curl and JSON are just getting tweaked a little bit. You know, it's like they add a few more options and commands in there, but they've been out since FileMaker 16, so I already said that. And then we have a new CEO of FileMaker. That's not really coinciding with the release, but I think that the marketing and the new leadership is going to maybe show some new things at the DevCon that of directions that FileMaker is going. So. Yes, well, he's listed on the website as an advisor. So I mean, I think he's still involved. You know, it's like I think they do that in general just to when they transition a CEO that they usually put the former CEO in an advisory role. So he's still there. I didn't have personal day-to-day contact with him anyway, but yeah. So. No, he's still there. I think he's head of. Bill Epling is head of Japan sales or something? Yeah. Or yeah. So he's still there.
So I don't know if he's going to be at DevCon, but for the old people in the room who've seen Dominique over the years, he's been a really, really steady hand. And I'm going to look him up, and if I can't find him at DevCon, I'm going to write him a letter. And I don't know how many of you met him before, but.
Oops. Can you turn that down just a little bit? It's real hot. I just want to make sure it gets recorded.
Yeah. So I don't know how many of you have met Dominique before, but he's been with FileMaker, what, 25? I mean, it's been a long time. And he's just been a really steady hand for the company. And one of the things that has been most important to me when I show up at a client site is I don't know about this FileMaker thing. What is this? The fact that he has guided FileMaker as an organization to just very steady growth. It's not been this up and down, back and forth, all our investors are doing this and crazy stuff. It's just been really, really steady, and I think it's been a testament to his personality and his character, but he has led the company, in my opinion, well and very steadily. Have we wanted some things that we're finally getting now? Have we wanted those for years? Yes, there's all that stuff, but if you get a chance to see him, if he shows up at DevCon, I just encourage you to kind of give him a final thanks as because in my opinion, he's guided the company really well. And between him and Bill Epling, who I don't know when his departure will be, the company has done well. And a lot of companies have come and gone, and FileMaker is still here.
Was that in order to be in senior leadership, you have to be bald.
Bald and tall.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
So, okay. So, Carson, you want to come up and share some things?
I said I would try to keep it short.
Okay. I'll get off the display here.
Alrighty, so the while function is a new function this went off. Is it? Can you hear me? Okay. I can't hear me. No, I'm just kidding. So this is a function, so there's two ways that we do logic, that we build logic and we work with data right in FileMaker. We either do it inside of scripts, so we have script steps, but then we also have the calculation engine. Calculation often live inside of script steps, but they're not exclusive to script steps, right? They also happen in fields and in some layout objects and other places. Yeah, so this is a new function inside of the calculation engine where we can do loops. So it's similar in a lot of ways to the loop steps in the script engine. It just allows us to do that in the calculation engine now without having to use scripts. So we have in the help menu, it's the while function, and we can set initial variables, and when there's brackets around that, means we can do multiple variables. We just separate them by semicolons. Then we have the condition, so this is the similar to the exit loop if step in the script loop. So while this condition is true and it's a logical statement, the loop will keep going. Then here's the logic. This is where we essentially change our variables. This is what loops. This is what changes every time, right? This is what loops. And then at the end, we have the result that we pass out. So in order to look at this, I made a simple database here. And we have a resource. This is salesperson, salesperson 1. And this has a table of events over here. And they're just related on the resource ID and then the foreign key in the event table. So we're just tracking events by resource. And so this is all of them. Here's a salesperson. And here's all their events. And this portal is not filtered at all. It is just showing stuff from the events, no filtering on that portal. Over here we have a portal, the same thing, except we're filtering it by if the month of the event date equals 5. So it's all the events that happened in May. So really simple setup. What we want to do here is we want to find a total of just this portal. All right, so we want to know the total leads, the sum of the leads that happened in May. That's our use case here that I just made up. So we could do a summary field, right? But we would have to add fields to the table, right? We could make a summary field to do this. Another way, if we didn't want to change the schema, is we could do a script if we were just going to use the data, but it would be maybe a little more difficult to display it on the layout. But we could do it with a script. So this is how we would do it with a script. This is one way you could do it with a script, using a loop. Here we have our loop, and I'm going to set a variable n, and that's going to count inside my loop. I'm going to say exit loop if n is greater than the count of events. So that's just all the related events to this resource. And then I'm going to set the date, and I'm going to use get nth record of the number n for the event date. So that's just going to start as 1. I'm going to get the first related record. The date, and I'm going to set leads the same way. I'm going to get the first related record for the leads. And then I'm going to say if the month of that date that I just got is equal to 5, add my sum variable. Sum equals the sum plus this current leads. All right? So this is essentially we're building a sum if like you do in Excel. And then at the end, I'm going to say, now I'm going to iterate my loop. N equals n plus 1, so now it's going to be 2. We'll go back to the top. If n is now greater than the count, we're going to exit. Otherwise, we're going to keep looping. And at the end, we're going to just show the custom dialog of that sum we came up with. All right, so this is how we do this with a loop. If we hit play, it's going to say 10. And our May total, we got 3, 4, and 3. That's 7 and 10, so that's 10. So if we change this to, can't change it over there. Change it over here, this one, to 4. We rerun the script. Should give us 11. Yep, now we get 11. All right, so that's how we loop with a script. Now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do this inside a calculation, though, to do it without a script. So what I made was a button bar with just one element, because the button bar is the one way you can do calculations on the layout, right? The really main native way to do calculations on the layout. So I'm going to have a calculated text for my button bar, and we're going to use the while loop. All right, so in our while loop, first we have our first set of brackets here. This is where we set our initial variables. Now inside, this is just like the let function. The variables don't have to have any, they can just be text, right? You don't have to put a $sign in front of these variables. I'm doing this little tilde. I've heard some people that do a cent sign, kind of like that. So here we're going to set our variable, n is 1, we're going to do the same thing, and the sum is going to be empty. Don't really have to do that, but that's just, well, maybe I do have to do that. Declare the variable up here. All right, so that's the first bracket, it's semicolon, initial variables. This is the condition. This is basically our exit loop if, except it's the opposite, right? So this is keep going in the loop if. So n is less than the count of events. As soon as n is not less than the count of events anymore, this is going to exit. All right? So this is the condition. Keep going in the loop if is basically what that means. All right, so now we come down to our loop, and we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to set a variable date, and I'm going to do it's the exact same thing, right? Get nth record n and leads, and I'm just going to do the same thing right here. Sum, and I'm going to just do a case statement. If month of the date is equal to 5, then add this leads to the sum. Otherwise, just return the same sum. And then we're going to add 1 to our variable. So this is just going to keep looping until n gets up to the count of the events, and then it's going to return the sum. All right, so same thing we did in the script. Turn this on, save the layout. So there we got 11, showing us as our total. And again, we can come down here and change. And now it shows 10. So now we have a sum of a filtered portal on a layout without having to add any fields, without having to add any scripts, without having to add anything. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. So that's just one case, right? And get nth record. But for these cases where you have to do is looping through, modifying data, a sum if case, you know, you want to skip some values, you want to add some values. So that's pretty cool. Now, just to highlight some of the, maybe one of the pitfalls, here's a simple, this is just in my data viewer. I have a really simple while loop, all right? I'm going to start n off as 1, keep going if n is less than 100, and just iterate n and show me what it is, all right? So this is going to run 100 times, it's just going to add 1 every time, all right? And it shows that it's 100, right? So if I say do this until you get to 200, it's going to add, essentially the calculation engine's going through, it's adding 1 200 times, and it's returning me 200, all right? So this works pretty cool until we get up to, so if I put 50,000 in there, that's going to work, all right? It's going to add 1 to n 50,000 times. If I do 50,001, I put 5,000, didn't I? 50,000. I thought I broke FileMaker. So 50,000 works if I do 50,001, there it is. 50,001 is going to return a question mark. All right, let me show that again. 50,000 with $499,000. There we go. 50,000. Interesting. It appears to be 50,002. Oh, I added 1 up. Okay. I'm going to prove that. That's right. So what we're trying to highlight here, right, is that there's a limit to the number of loops that a while function is going to do. 50,000 is the limit. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. So 50,000 is the limit to the number of loops that a while function will do. And if it hits that limit, it's just going to stop, all right? And it's going to return a question mark. It's not going to return the current value of anything. It's just going to return a question mark. It's an error. Now, in the loop, in the script step, you can set up a loop that will go on forever, right? You can create a script loop that will go on forever. And hopefully you have a debugger or something, but there's no safeguard, there's no hard safeguard in the script engine to an infinite loop. In the while function, there is a safeguard, right? It's 50,000 iterations. So we can't add more than 50,000. Like here, we set 50,000. So it's not, because it would be really hard. In the script engine, right, we have the script debugger and stuff that we can turn on, and maybe we can kill that script. We can also hit escape a lot of times unless we turn that off. So there's ways for a user to get out of that. In the calculation engine, it's completely blind, right? There's not, like if I threw this in a layout object, if I threw that in the button and I had an infinite while loop, that would be a really big problem. Like the layout would never render. It would make FileMaker grind to a halt. So we have this hard stop of 50,000 loop iterations. But what they also did was they gave us a new function called set recursion, which allows us to increase this number of loops. So if you get into a situation where you have to do more than 50,000 loops, what you got to do is you got to wrap your entire calculation in the set recursion function. And then we can say 50,001. And now it'll work to 50,001. Now if we do 50,002, again, we've gone outside of our recursion limit, and there we are. But so you can, and I don't know of any technical limit to the number of recursions. So like, and you can crank this up to like 1 million. And eventually, right, so that time, that 1 million loops, that it took it a good couple seconds to add that up. But it will work. So it's interesting to see how you can kind of really tax the FileMaker. So let's see, if we crank this up to 2 million, I bet it'll take a good 10. Yeah, I put 2, it's working. My FileMaker calculation engine is working to add 1 2 million times, and there it did it. So I don't know, about 10 seconds for FileMaker to add 1 to a number 2 million times. But that's you can increase your recursion limit.
Have you done any testing to see if the while is faster than scripting?
I've not done any testing. My inclination is that it would be, because the calculation engine seems to be deeper than the script engine, since this calculation engine runs in a lot of different script steps. But
I think there's a non-zero amount of time it takes to load the next script step too.
yeah,
And this would avoid that.
Never mind.
I think there's a non-zero time that it takes to load any particular script step, just the script step itself and whatever calculation or whatever, programming under the hood goes along with that script step that this would avoid by not having to do a, exit loop if and then this and then, add this and then do that and then whatever. Like that there's a certain penalty to doing that. And
Yeah.
the more if you can consolidate, multiple script steps into a single step of logic, something like in Carson's example script, you first set the variable, then you went into the loop, then you had an exit condition, and then you had the iteration of the counter at the end of the loop, and you can consolidate all those into one step, and that's faster than doing it in 3 separate steps, even though the math of it is really the same. And so I think this does that same thing where it gets you away from that extra sort of baggage that goes along with the script steps.
yeah. And then also the fact that in a lot of cases, right, you can't use scripts, right? So if you're talking about field level calculations, you can't use scripts. So you could add schema, right? You could add relationships and other fields and summary fields and that kind of stuff to do field level stuff. But then you're taxing your whole system, right? So that everybody loads that every time they load this. Whereas in the calculation engine, you can limit this to run only at the time when the user needs it, like on a layout, for example. It's only going to run for the users that load that layout. It's not going to be loaded into the entire schema of the system for all your users.
Is there a difference between this running in calculation and in this case on a button bar on that user's workstation as far as the data that needs to be transferred back and forth versus a script? Or is that neither here nor there?
They would both run locally to the user. So
If you need the data in a record, you have to get the record, no matter how you're processing, whether you need to get the record in a script or whether you need to get the record in calculation. So in Carson's example of leads in a month, you still have to retrieve the record no matter what you're going to do with it. So you have to get the record from the server in order to run it in the script or to process it in a calculation
Well, in certain situations, perform script on server is actually a lot slower than doing it because of the amount of time it takes to spin up a server session.
If you're loading a lightweight copy of FileMaker Pro on the server, loading the entire schema of the file that you need to do, going to that table, and then counting records.
Yeah.
So that there's a penalty to doing that. So it kind of depends on
It can be in these.
the record load penalty.
It can be in the neighborhood of several seconds just to spin up a perform script on server session. So, depending on the scenario. Yeah.
And when using get nth record, does it have to load the, because when you're going from record to record, it needs to load the entire record, all of the fields. When you're using get nth record, pointing to a specific, does it still need to load the entire record?
It depends. I mean, that's always the answer with FileMaker, is it depends. In Carson's case, he has a portal on the layout, so those records have already been delivered to the local workstation. If you didn't have the portal on the layout, then you wouldn't have retrieved those records yet. So then you would have to retrieve them if you needed data from them.
And if you had 1,500 records in that portal, it wouldn't load all 1,500 records, though.
You're right, it caches some of them in case you're going to start scrolling.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to note that the while function, while it's happening in the calculation in a single step, it is still looping through, and it's doing a separate calculation on all of those things. So if you're going to add up all the things in a record, you have to know all the records anyways, right? So there's no way of getting away from the records themselves in this scenario. But it's still looping through and doing all of those calculations. So like in this case where you're adding up 2 million, you can actually have a significant performance hit depending on what you throw into this loop.
So it's not necessarily a silver bullet.
No. Yep. It's just another option. Yep. And I will say, so there's a lot, so we have the variables, then we have the condition, then we have the logic, and then we have the result. Even when I was doing this, like, it's a little bit to wrap your mind around. Like, the errors are, so it's good to do your while things in the data viewer and see what's happening so you can debug them because it's easy to trip yourself up. Or even like with that thing with where I set my initial n variable to 1 to begin with, right? Instead of, so I'm losing a loop that I thought I would have had before, so.
All right, so your demo file brings up a number of different questions here. One is that we have what we would have done before is we would have always created a calculation field that gives us a sum, looking through that relationship, pointing towards those related fields. And if we wanted to make sure that we had at least a number there, we can have that sum then plus 0. So
So yeah, it's important. I mean, it depends, right? If you truly are only using the data for viewing on a layout, then adding, like we mentioned before, adding more schema, more fields, and more relationships on the relationship graph is going to be a performance hit. Might not be perceptible, but it's going to be a performance hit for all of your users. Just adding it to the layout and doing it in an object-oriented way is only going to be a performance hit for the user that looks at this. And then it's a good trade-off, right? Because they want to see the data, and so they're going to take that performance hit.
So we've got an option as far as, you know, the way that we may have done this before is we have a drop down in a global field and we build a separate relationship from the resource to the events, and we filter and use some things, but we have a separate relationship for that.
I will show you. I mentioned this before. Well, sorry, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, and then the second thing is that if we don't need that total, which currently says 10, if we don't need that on any kind of complete report, then this is a great way to get the result that we need just on screen without adding anything else to the system. Whereas if we're going to be using this in some summary reports, then we do need a summary field somewhere that can work within that.
I think part of that, trying to avoid creating a table of curves at all costs, which has come from, in particular working with a very high availability system where you don't want to make schema commits during the day because it affects users. It can hang the system when people have records open. It resets everybody's tabs and slide panels to wherever, whatever the defaults are. There's a lot of impacts to that. Here, you're working on some layout, you need a total, you don't have to go and edit schema. So, maybe in a smaller system, there's more tolerance for doing that. But, in a bigger system, if you were going to do this in schema, you'd have to, wait till after hours maybe to do it, or do it on the weekend, where you'd rather than spending time with your kids or whatever. So there's some selfishness in this as well.
That's the deciding factor.
Well, that's yeah, and that's kind of what's driven me to trying to avoid schema edits is working in systems like that.
Or you do it in a script.
Yeah, any way that you can do it without going into managed database.
I think we should move on because we've got like 4 other features. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carson.
Well, mine's going to be really, really fast compared to Carson's, but I had an easy one. It was easy. There you go. Yep. All right, so I'm doing the new import function. How many people here have used the new import function? How many use the old one? Yeah, about- So I've just got a simple database. You'll see there are no records. And I want to import a scuba equipment list. And in this scenario, I've got 2 people, one that built the list and someone that took the photos. And so we're going to do an example of how you can do multiple imports. I'll import the equipment first. In fact, let me do this. I shouldn't have done that first. Assume that I'm just going to the spreadsheet. It's buried in there someplace. So this is the new look, and normally if we were doing a brand new import, this window would pop up, and you have the option still of doing a standard import where you're adding records, you're updating records, or you're replacing records. And in this case, we're going to add records. And on the left-hand side, you'll notice that I'm on record 2. Record 1, I'm actually have set to use as field names, but I could say it was data. And by doing this, it'll ignore the first record of imported information. And I'm also going to say, let's import by matching names. And this is very similar to how the old one was as far as being able to select how you wanted things sorted. And here you'll notice that it matched all the names that it could. However, the manufacturing one, it did not find. And so I'm going to say import. And everything that is green is already listed to be imported on something else. So if I were to click on one of those, like if I said bind, notice the bind disappeared, but manufacturing is now going to import on that. So I'm going to switch this one back, and I will make it bind. And this one was a name field difference, so I will select manufacturing. Again, notice manufacturer is not green, so you know it's not being used. And this red cogwheel, I'm going to uncheck this. Anything that has an auto enter in the existing database, or in FileMaker 17 or older, if you imported and you wanted auto enter, it was all or none. Either everything, modification, date, time, who by, everything was imported, or none of it was. Here you have the ability to say field by field what you want done. And let me I'm going to say that we're going to import them. Without these being red, they're not going to import them. If I were to check this, it would. And there you can see you can do it individually. And actually, I'm going to leave the created on, and I'm going to turn the modified off. And we're going to import the records. And it imported 499 records. Now, and I can scroll through those, and they're all there. Now we're going to import photos, and this is coming from a FileMaker database. I had sent somebody else off and said, here's the IDs of all the product we need, the serial numbers, go get photos of them. I don't want to add them to the database because they're already in there. Instead, I want to update them. And I'm going to say I want to do it by matching names. And notice that if I say I want to import photo, I have no photo field in my current database. In fact, here's another nice feature. You can type in and it'll search or filter out what you're looking for. So if you have hundreds or thousands of fields, you can quickly find them using that filter feature. Again, I don't have the photo field, so I'm going to click on this without losing my place. I'm going to type in photo. We're going to say it's a container. I'll create it. Now, I wish it would have automatically selected that for me, but it did not, but it's there. And now that is set. I do not want to import the created. The modified, I'm fine with. Primary key, I certainly don't need to import. The photo I do want to import, and actually, I need to now, because I'm doing an update, I need to select what the matching field is. So in the existing data, it's going to look at the serial number compared to the new data for the serial number, and it's only going to import the photos for items that have the serial number match.
If you tried to proceed without selecting a match field, would it error out?
You know, I never tried that, but hey, it's a demo, let's do it. Woohoo! Actually, match. So we're all set. And again, I am not, or actually this is backwards to me. Let me click right on there. I should show down here. You also got the cogwheel. It shows you all of the fields that have auto enter in one spot. So if you had a long screen of imports, you could go down here and see it. And I want to just do the modified. And I'm going to say import. And it imported 90 of them that the serial numbers matched. Let's go in here and add the new field I created for photos. And there I still have the same 499 records, but I updated them using the match field, using the new interface for imports. Anybody see anything I missed? Yeah.
Not necessarily something that you missed, but something that
keyboard-driven, but not quite.
Yep,
Like,
I agree.
You can arrow up and down, but I couldn't get anything. Is there some command to pop open that search dialog?
Let's see, I've got a utility on here called KeyQ. And I can see we can move focus to things, but I am not seeing anything in particular. The utility I'm using is called KeyQ, where it shows you all the keyboard shortcuts for where you're at. But that company, if they have not updated FileMaker 18, it wouldn't show up anyway. Without dialogue on? I have not. Okay. I will say that the day I got the beta copy of 18, I had to import like thousands of records from hundreds of fields, and I was never so happy to receive that beta, to try it out, and it worked flawlessly. So that saved me a lot of time. So, thank you.
We just had a new grandbaby a week and a half ago, and we got to show her off. This is little Esme. She was born in the bathroom because we were birthing at home, and all of a sudden she wanted to come right away. So my son-in-law Dan delivered his fifth child. Before they were going to do a water birth at home, and Esme came real quick. So anyway, she was 15 days overdue, and interestingly enough was the smallest of their 5 children by birth weight.
You say 50? You say 50 days over?
15, sorry. Every woman in the room is like crossing her legs going, no! Yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to be digging into the data file manipulation script steps. I need to give some credit where credit is due. Maka Encarnação from Slang Consulting, a former colleague from my previous employer, did a really nice job putting together a blog post and a demo file. I'm going to be using that and pulling off of her blog entry here, and then also going through the demo file and just some of the things that I learned as we went. So anyway, if you go to slangconsulting.com under company, go down to blog down here, and then they also do Salesforce and web stuff, so you can get to the subset. But they're putting together a series of blog entries as well, and she was one of the first ones that I saw that was really well done. So I'm pulling from her usage. So, all right. So this is their starting point here. I'm going to go to the Let's Get Started, and I want to jump into the new script steps for file script steps. You'll notice that most of these have the word data in them. Create data file, open data file, close data file, read from data file, write to data file, get data file position, set data file position, etc. Those are critical because that you see that, because there's also an open file and a close file, etc. So as you're looking to the data file script steps, you're going to want to make sure that you're pulling the right one. Otherwise, you're not going to get the result that you want. You're going to go, why is that? I thought I was going to see this, and I didn't. So these are the primary script steps that are new, and I don't recall, did we have the get file size, or is that part of the new ones as well? In 17, I don't think we did. Yeah, you can get file size by doing get as number. function or a get object attribute. Get object get. That would, yeah, you'd have to point to a container field. Right, an outside file. Yeah. So anyway, so these are the script step options that we have available to us. And let me go in here. I need to slide this over. This is moving. And I don't want it. All right. So a couple things that Maka did, it was kind of amazing as she was kind of just exploring and seeing. She could create not only these file types using the create data file, but she could also create a JPEG, a doc file. She created a number of different file types. I'm thinking, oh, thank goodness, now we can create a new Word file and read that data file and replace the scribe function that we've been using from 360works that the plugin's been using, has been performing well, although we had some conversion-related issues moving from FileMaker 13 up to current version. But it was interesting, although FileMaker allowed her to create those files, when you tried to open them, they may or may not have opened properly. So I could create a file .jpeg, and it would show up on my desktop, and it would look like it's a proper file, but when you double-click to open it, it did not do what you wanted. So from her testing and from a little bit of my own here, these are going to be the recommended file types as far as creating files. So thinking this through again here, where am I going to use this in a system for my client? So you may or may not be creating files. You may or may not be creating a Java file out of FileMaker, but knowing that you can see those, you can also read from those very readily as well. All of these here are very, very text-based and pretty simple. And then these other ones here, these are things that I think were on a wish list that did not make it in. And I'll show you what it looks like when you try to read a data file, a Word file, and show you what that looks like. So Maka did a really nice job putting these kind of in the order in which you would normally do this. We're going to click a Create Data File here, and she set this up really nicely with a couple buttons here to say I want to put this out on my desktop or put it in my Documents folder. If you click here, all it does is it sets your basic field here. And if I type in any text here, my new text file, .txt, and I've got allow creation of folders here. I don't have that set in there. This is just a straight deal here. She's got nice notifications. There's our new text file. You notice that we can double click on it, we open it, there's nothing in it at this point. We've simply created the file and it now exists. Take a quick look at that script step, or the script itself. There are a lot of steps in here. There's some really nice variable checking, or excuse me, error checking, and how to set this up. But it's pretty basic in that you really need to give it, set your path, which is what we do when we typed in my new text file.txt, etc. And then we have the create data file. The create data file has a couple parameters here. We need to give it a path. And then we've got allow create folders on or not. So if I create data file and I add between my slashes here a folder slash, and now I do this, it will create a folder, and inside we've got another my new text file. So as you think about how this is going to be used, it's nice to be able to immediately just create a directory, create a folder, put it wherever you want, and again, you got to know your directory path. You're going to desktop and documents are going to be your most common, etc. But it allows you to set that up. So once you've created a file here, you'll notice that it's adding these down here. That's one of the things that she's doing, so you can see and follow those. The way she's got this set is that you also have the ability to open this. So if I want to open a data file, it's going to remember what the last file is. She's got a global field, which is remembering one of these here. She has these nice buttons here to say, if you just use your create data file path, click here and it'll paste that in, or you can preset the documents or desktop path. And when you run, that could not create, error code 100. Let me go to my desktop path, and this is called
Name of the file is wrong.
my new text file.txt. Now it's open. You see that she's got this here. FileMaker allows us, with each of these related records here, she's creating a record for them, to have the file open. In order for you to do any work in it, etc., you need to open it. So if you're working with an existing file somewhere, one of your first script steps will be to open the file. You'll need to check does it exist before you open it, etc. But in order to do any reading or writing, you have to have it open first. We also have the ability to close a data file. And here, we've got file IDs that are set up. We've got preloaded file IDs. And I'm going to close file ID number 4. And you'll notice now this is no longer open.
Well, you might not want to skip ahead if you're going to hit this, but if you were saving these on the server's document folder or something,
Mm-hmm.
does FileMaker server only allow one user to open a data file at a time?
That is a great question. I don't know from a perform script on server whether it allows you. Because the way that she's got this set up here is that every time you open a data file, she's creating a record that you can then manage. But if you're doing this on the fly, if you weren't creating a record, if you just temporarily needed to open an external file, read, write to it, etc., and then close it, and you weren't doing that simultaneously with somebody else or with another file yourself, I do not know the answer to that question. All right. So I want to show you what the open data file looks like here. I've got Fred Flintstone. I'm just going to make this really simple. Here's a text document that we're using at the Fish and Wildlife Service for a massive data merge. So this is what the document looks like as is. So if we're going to open a data file and we're going to get desktop path and we're going to make that Fred DOCX. We've now got an open file, and if we want to read data from that file, I'm going to say this file ID number 6. We've got a number of things to choose from as far as our parameters in the script step for reading a data file. Maka has probably 4 or 5 paragraphs about, or that include something about whether you should do UTF-8, UTF-16, or bytes. Generally, the bytes is going to be anything that's non-binary, or excuse me, non-text-based, et cetera. So your JPEGs, et cetera, those sorts of things will be in there. But as far as UTF-8, UTF-16, if you're working with an existing file type, trying to keep it in either 8 or 16, finding out ahead of time what that would be. If you're working with a file that was created by some other program, try and find out what that is and then mimic it. So if it was written in 8, read it in 8 and then save it in 8. If it was written in 16, read it in 16, write it in 16, etc. And we're going to save this, and you'll see what this document looks like in UTF-8. So I thought, as long as the data is here, because I wanted to take this merged document and use a substitute function, which is a standard FileMaker function, and if we could get rid of a plugin, awesome. But I tried to read this, and then I tried to edit, and as I went through this, this is literally all gibberish. there's nothing useful in here that we could use, however. So although FileMaker says, hey, I can read that file, it's not really doing anything useful for you, which is why I put this list out on the desktop here, as these are the ones that you're going to want to be digging into.
The reason I can't read it is it's a zip file. That's a zip file of other files, XML and binary.
Ah.
And so when you see that PKI,
Mm-hmm.
that means PK zip.
So are there any
You'd have to, if you,
other doc types
if you unzip
like
it,
this?
you can edit the stuff inside it,
So is there a way to unzip it?
not in the way of FileMaker.
Okay.
It'd be really useful though.
So,
If only there was an open source library that lets you unzip things cross-platform that FileMaker could bundle into FileMaker. But no, you'd have to unzip it using something else, and then once you've unzipped it, you could then modify
and then rezip it.
inside or read it, because it's all XML. It's all open XML.
So would there be a way, from a technical standpoint, using whatever tools that are out there to say, I do want to read that?
You can't do it without a plugin to unzip it, unfortunately.
Okay.
Or you can also adjust your workflow on the Word side. Whatever's generating that, or whoever's generating that file could save it differently. Instead of saving it as docx, I think FileMaker can look in, or FileMaker, a human can look inside a template or XML version of a Word document and make sense of what's inside there.
Yeah, there's other export formats that are not zip, but docx is a container format, not a file format. So it's a container of other files,
Hmm.
all of which are text-based, obviously. Unless it's an image.
So without a plugin, is there a way to
Without a plugin,
unzip?
you could set it up to a web service, have that unzip it, and then send you back. You could tell which file you want, and you can send it back to you by insert from your route.
It's sounding more and more like the Scribe plugin is a good thing.
Well, but you could, it's still a native FileMaker. You just need to have something. If you want to get away from plugins, then you'd have to use something that's not a plugin, essentially a microservice. Otherwise you're stuck with plugins because FileMaker hasn't given us unzipping.
Yep. Wait for version 19 or 20, see what happens. All right.
They seem to be moving in the right direction at least.
Yep. All right, so if you, I'm going to grab our new text file here. If I try and read this, right now there's nothing in there. But because, close up here, because this file is open, I can also write to that data file. If I run this, now I go in and open this, you'll see here is some text. So of significance in doing this is when you are writing data file, and I didn't have a chance to get in and look at the file positions. One of the challenges, one of the things you need to be aware of as you're writing is that if you're going to be modifying, for example, a file, you need to be aware of, am I going to load the entire log file? And server logs, et cetera, error logs. These were some of the examples that Mock and some of the other blog entries that I looked at. They said you might not want to be reading the entire file. You might just want to grab a certain portion of it. But if you're going to be updating that log file or the TXT file or whatever, you need to be aware your new text is going to appear. By default, FileMaker is going to append whatever you type in to the end. If you need to insert something in there, you need to be aware of what position you push that into. So if I'm going to write to the data file, it's the same file number, ID number 5 that I've entered here. I run this and did it do it? Yes, I clicked on that twice and it added that additional text in this. So the to get data file position and set data file position is where you, the functions that you would use to decide where you want to insert that text. So if you need to insert something before or after the existing data that's in the file, that you would use these to do this. I have not looked in, I don't know if anybody else has on this, whether or not you can just say, if I'm going to read the whole thing, even if it's just raw text here, can I just use my substitute function and completely overwrite everything? Has anybody else looked at that yet? Okay, I'll put that on my list. But get file size is a very simple thing to do. My new text file, yep. And I'll tell you how many bytes it is. So last, the get file exists is something really helpful if you're needing to see if the file is already out there, so that you don't overwrite something. The delete file is one of those things that is, I'm really glad it's there, because the only way to delete a file before, if you had to create a temp file out on the desktop and then delete it, was to use the export field contents and give it the file path, but not, give it what you're exporting to, and it would delete that. With this new script step, delete file, you can delete something that probably should be a part of your operating system. So this is a pretty dangerous new function, the script function that they gave us. Get file exists is obvious, and it's also nice to be able to rename files as well with that. So anyway, Mock had a great article, and there are a number of them that are out there that are on Lumen Fire's blog, et cetera, that are pointed to. But any other things that people learned or questions? Mike?
With the rename file, can you move the file?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So I'm going to take, was it my new, and I think we can drop it immediately into,
The top one's your existing file.
oh, there we go. Oh, it doesn't read, yeah, this is just a new name. Yep. So to not move that there, I think you'd have to read it and then write it to a different location, different directory, and then delete the original. I think would be the process to do that. Stephen? Yes, the script step. Yes. Yes. So, and this is where if you've got, I'm just going to use a Word document as an example again here. How do you know when you've got enough of it because of all the fluff and garbage that surrounds the actual text, tab settings and colors and font and all that other stuff. Whereas if it's literally just a raw text file, log file or something, it's a much simpler thing to figure out. But I'd throw that in the data viewer and see what your results are to figure out what parameters are to get the records or the data from the file that you want. Anything else? All right. Who's next on the docket?
Okay. I told Tim I would talk a little bit about FileMaker Server, and what's different in 18. There's not a whole lot different, so this should be pretty quick. But in terms of installing FileMaker Server, that's pretty much the same process as it was in 17. You have to use the FileMaker license certificate to install it, and it has to be in your downloads folder when you install it so that it can see it there. So that part hasn't really changed in 18 from 17, but the significant change for those under licensing is FileMaker Pro. You have to use the license certificate to install FileMaker Pro Advanced, and ideally, if it's in the downloads folder, it'll find it there. Or if it's not, you can browse for the location of that and then pull it up. It doesn't let you actually put in type in the actual certificate anymore. You actually have to use the certificate file. Yeah. So that's not a server change, but a FileMaker Pro Advanced change. So I'm just going to show you real quick what's different in terms of the admin console. Not very much. Okay, one of the changes is the icon over here. That indicates whether it's open or closed. For example, if I were to close this file, it's hard to see on the screen, but that's blue. And that goes away. If you open it up, you can see it turns to red and then to blue really quick. Pretty minor change. Another thing that I was, on this server help page, what's new, in the backup schedules tab and the configuration script schedules, it says that there's a better status indicator for the status of the script, whether it's running or it's succeeded or it's failed. It's hard to show that, but let's see, if I actually run this, let's run now. You can see it says it's running here. It's running the backup now. I'm not sure if that's any different than before. So I kind of had a hard time telling whether anything has actually changed here or not. I think maybe if there is some kind of an error, maybe it gives a better indicator. Okay, so it said briefly there it succeeded. So that's really a minor change, but anyway, it is that is a change. The same would be true under the script schedules as well. What else? Under the data API, it'll show you a little better information in terms of the amount of data that's transmitted through the data API. So that's something that they added. What was the other thing I was going to mention? Oh. Just under general settings here, it'll tell you the date that server was started, which wasn't in there before. So in this case, Monday, June 10th. So really, there's very minor changes in the admin console user interface. There are other changes, maybe more significant, that are under the hood kinds of changes, such as this whole startup restoration feature. I haven't really dug into that very much, and I don't know, maybe some of you know more about that, but the startup restoration features, let's see, if databases have inconsistencies indicating that they were not properly closed, startup restoration uses a restoration log to restore the files to their last consistent state. So that's potentially a significant improvement. Yeah, go
Start
ahead.
restoration feature is in conjunction with the parallel processing. It's more important because there's more opportunity if the power got pulled on the server to have corruption. And so the fact that it can restore it and redo those things is really important.
Sure.
Is that an automatic thing, or is that something we have to enable or configure in any way?
I think it's an automatic thing, yeah.
You can turn it off, but I think it's on by default.
Yeah.
Is it command line interface to turn it off?
I believe so, yeah. And
Yeah.
from what I've read on some of the other blog posts, that log that it keeps, yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. I can hear it.
There we go.
So the startup restoration, it mentioned there that uses the restoration log, and there is a performance hit on the server for it doing that as it goes, because I think it's basically keeping a log of like every change that happens. So you can turn it off, and from what I've read, there's a performance hit, like if you're just timing 17 versus 18 or that on versus off, you'll see things are slower in 18 for stuff that is, adding records and whatever server intensive stuff. But if you've got a file with a lot of users, all of the multi-threading makes up for that. So if you're just testing one person adding 1 million records, it's going to be slower. But if you're testing a bunch of people doing normal stuff, that's a lot of, form script on server and whatever else day-to-day stuff, overall it's going to be faster because of the multi-threading on server now. So.
Okay. Yeah, good.
And you mean 18 is going to be faster than that?
Yeah.
In theory, you could turn off the log,
Yeah.
have the speed for users using 18. You would just be at a lot higher risk of corruption.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So the existence of this restoration log is meaningless if your server's not crashing.
Well, if you're a really good tightrope walker, you don't need the net.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm not using this, right now, it only does one thing. But this is what every other database engine on the planet does, is it writes a transaction log. And this is what allows databases on Amazon. You can do point restores to the microsecond. So you can say, hey, I actually want to roll my database back to this exact point in time. And it can, what it does is it goes with that last good backup, and then it fast forwards up the transaction log to that point in time. I'm not saying FileMaker's going to go there. I'm saying this type of log that they're finally keeping allows that type of functionality that other databases have had for a while. So hopefully, we might get like point-in-time restores for FileMaker Server, which would be really cool. But now that they have the data, they can do it.
Sure. Yeah.
Does anybody know if there's a limit on because I know that some logs you can set on be 40 megs max, etc. Is there limits to be set on the server log?
I don't know.
Or excuse me, the restoration
Yeah,
log?
I don't know. That's a good question.
And then if you're just starting your server, as long as you shut it down properly, the startup restoration, again, if it's not needed, won't work. Or it won't kick in if you don't need it. If all the database is closed properly, then
Right. Yep.
all is well.
Yep. So it's a good thing. Other than that, there's not a lot of other things to really talk about. Some changes to the data API and the admin API, and some changes to that, but that's about it. So,
How
All right.
long do you have? I can give you a couple minutes here, but I think the pizza's getting cold.
No, this will be real quick.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to just say was that it really makes a lot of sense to stay on the latest version of FileMaker, especially with these releases of every year. Even if it doesn't seem like there's a lot of benefits to upgrading, if you can, I'd encourage you to do it.
Okay, this will be so quick, I don't even have a demo prepared. Just a couple little things that don't make the feature list of 18. I talked with Carson, his favorite feature is when you're in layout mode, you select an object or multiple objects, you can use the arrow key to nudge things around, but now if you hold down shift, it will nudge it 10 times as far. So that's a little thing that, you know, it's been around like in the Adobe universe forever, and yeah, in my mind, as much they can steal from, you know, the InDesign tool set for layouts, the better. Another thing that's really handy, if you're in a calculation engine or, you know, anywhere where you're specifying your table occurrence : field name, if you have something where you're just changing which table occurrence you're aiming at, like maybe you're going to a different relationship to get there, or you've copied something from one layout to another, if you double click on the table occurrence name, that'll select everything up to that : and you start typing, it'll give you your autocomplete. Before, if you hit enter, it would finish your table occurrence name, add another : so you now have 4 colons. Now it's smart enough not to do that. So if : is already there, yep. Just one of those little, okay, thank you for thinking of that. Some of the managed security changes, it requires your password much less often. The other day I had a client that got a new computer, you know, they were storing their password in Keychain, they had no idea what their password was. So I just needed to open up the file, go into managed security, reset their password. I never had to authenticate. I was already authenticated as an admin user when I went into the database. I was able to go into managed security, select that user, change her password, have it require her change it again, and get back out without having to authenticate. So from what I can tell, the only things that will require you to authenticate is more of a safeguard. If you've changed your admin access, it will require you to authenticate to make sure that you didn't lock yourself out. So it's less of a security feature and more of a safety feature for you now. And then one thing Matt mentioned to me, I haven't tested it, but apparently you're no longer able to delete your own account. You can disable your account, but you can't delete it. So, you can't delete a full access account via script anyway, but apparently you can't delete your own account in there.
You could delete your own account before, but then it would prompt you to log in with a full access account to make sure you had access.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's all I got. Just the little goodies that make it easier day to day to work on, but like I said, don't necessarily make the bullet list. So.
One other